Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I mean, definitely without the back end of PDD, I don't think Temu would have been able to grow as fast as they did, both from a financing standpoint as well as from a supply chain standpoint. I mean, their supplier ecosystem, I think, is very strong suited. They reportedly has suppliers that can do low MOQs as much as or as little as 100 to 500, units per SKU, which is super low for like an apparel type of item. It's really fast fashion, and compare that with like Zara. I think their MOQ reported is about like 3,000 units per SKU, which is still low for a brand that size, but for Temu to get it down to like 100 per SKU to be able to test something is pretty insane. um and I guess they like do they have like a kind of secondary type of marketplace where suppliers can kind of understand their raw material levels to try to work together, or how does that work? Because I
Yeah,
can
well,
imagine
so
as
it's
fast.
interesting because yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the things that they built or that they're using, Shein actually built. So the ecosystem that Shein built, Temu has basically come in and usurped that supply chain to some extent. They use the exact same suppliers, they use a lot of the same tech stack, and Shein actually developed a secondary trading platform that allowed the factories to share their production resources. So these would be things like fabric, managerial staff, workers, in order to reduce the waste in their system. And so I think this is still a proprietary software that Shein's using, or that Shein is using their factories. But if I'm a factory that's on the Shein platform and I'm also selling to Temu, like uh, they're getting the benefit of it without having to incur that cost. And so it's really interesting how uh, Shein and Temu have battled back and forth, and they've created this juggernaut of a low cost, low quality manufacturing ecosystem that is duking it out. And it's been interesting because what Pinduoduo has done is they've been able to develop a unique consumer to manufacturer model. And so by using social campaigns, uh, luring people with volume discounts and bulk purchases and coupon relays, they've been able to generate really, really big orders where those manufacturers will quickly consume those orders that they're prepping for delivery. And so many of these factories are dealing with razor thin profit margins and an intense pressure to cut prices, not only from Temu, but also from Shein. And it's kind of funny, but also not funny. But these guys fight each other so much that in 2023, Temu was suing Shein, accusing Shein of using like mafia-style imitation tactics against its suppliers. And you know, yeah, it's just this weird thing that's going back and forth where they're constantly trading lawsuits and doing things like that. But one of the things that's interesting about the manufacturing base is that Temu insists, and they're getting enough traction that this is actually happening, but they're insisting that the manufacturers' prices are lower than anywhere else in the world, including what you can buy in China. So let me just repeat that. If you are a Chinese factory selling on Temu, you have to offer a price that's lower than if you were selling in your home market, which is just mind blowing. And Temu is able to kind of to put the leverage on that. They say, hey, look, we're going to cover all your shipping, we're covering all your advertising costs for the factories. I just need you to make this as low as possible. And depending on some of the tax, you may know this better than I do, but I know depending on some of the tax regulations in China, you can get a pretty sizable rebate from the government if you're geared for export. And so it's possible that these factories are have a negative margin out the door, but they're getting a 10 to 15% rebate from the government, and therefore that's how they're making their small profit.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, they definitely have some rebates for exports. I don't think necessarily it's as high as like 10 or 15% per se, but it could be like 3 to 5, maybe 8% on the high end. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to think about that, you can now buy a, sweater or whatever it may be from Temu for less than what it's going to cost in China, which is like, I think pretty much like never happened before. But with this crazy supplier base and really low MOQs and fast turns comes a lot of quality concerns. I know in April 2023, the U.S. China Economic and Security Review Commission stated that Temu's lack of affiliation with established brands has raised concern about their product quality as well as accusations of copyright infringement, which I think continues to happen as they try to like release products quickly. Is hey, they see some sort of like cool dress that's going viral or whatever it may be, and they just copy it without thinking twice. And so I wonder how this is really going to play out for them. I think, eventually some regulator is going to sue them. There's going to be backlash for that. But I guess, look, when you're this well capitalized, a little lawsuit for copyright is not going to really, hurt you too much, which is unfortunate because, I know a lot of designers in the States that have, been ripped off from these Chinese marketplaces, and a lot of brands that have been ripped off too. And it's just really frustrating to see. I mean, even for sellers on Amazon, right? I mean, you hear so many stories of FBA sellers being ripped off by, Chinese merchants all the time. I think it's even more prevalent for these marketplaces like Temu and Shein. And so it's interesting to see this dynamic. I mean, what other kind of quality concerns are you seeing, Aaron, with Temu?
Yeah, it's one thing if the product isn't of good quality, but very quickly you start skirting into things that are against U.S. regulations. And so, uh, in June of 2023, House of Representatives report came out and said that Temu has admitted that it doesn't expressly prohibit the sale of goods from the Uyghur region, and so they don't conduct any audits, they don't report any compliance systems, and so it's highly likely that forced labor, Uyghur labor is being used on some of these products being sold in China. And if actually in June of 2023, Bloomberg reported that they had validated that products that were directly sourced from is it Zhangjiang? Is that how you pronounce it?
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang. Like, yeah, I should just have you do all the Chinese names. You speak Chinese. But Zhangjiang, all of those items being produced, we're making them directly onto Temu, and that's a direct violation of U.S. law that's banning goods from this region. And so it's a really difficult thing here, where to some extent Temu is saying, hey, we're just a marketplace, but the other extent, like, they're facilitating getting around these sanctions, getting around these U.S. laws.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see all this happening, and I think it's I mean, yeah, when you're selling products at such a cheap price, I mean, there's got to be some labor scrutiny behind closed doors, which is unfortunate, and we don't see it as end consumers. And I think they're like other side of the story from a supply chain perspective is their logistics. I mean, do you want to touch on how they're able to get products to doors and consumer in America at such a cheap price? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's two things that they've done really, really smart. The first one is just thinking about what they're shipping. And so they focus on small volume, lightweight products like jewelry, right? That is, we talked about this. This is probably the perfect, most pure e-commerce, product that's out there. And so when they do have to ship heavier goods, they're mixing lightweight products with heavyweight products to better utilize the loading capacity. So when I was at Unilever and we were moving trucks around, we kind of did the same thing here, where if we moved Hellman mayonnaise, which is very heavy, and Lipton tea, which is very light, rather than having a truck of just tea, a truck of just mayonnaise, we would mix them. And so we put mayonnaise on the bottom, tea on the top, and that helped use most of the weight, and the cube of the truck. And so they're starting to do that as well in their air freight capacity that's coming through. What they've also done is they've made a conscious decision to have as relaxed of delivery time as they could. So, where the other end of the market is saying, we're going to give you a day-defined service and we're going to have it deliver as quickly as possible, they're saying, hey, I just want to make sure it gets there eventually, and what's the lowest possible price you can charge me? And so that's one thing they've done. And with that, they've been able to, with their bulk buying, with their mixing, and with the selection on much lower cost, they've been able to get a small parcel from Guangzhou to the U.S. for as low as $1, and could be even lower when they're shipping that in bulk and some of the air freight containers they're using. And so, you keep going a little bit deeper. Once it's in the U.S., they're regularly utilizing regional carriers in the U.S. As opposed to using major parcel carriers. And so, typically, regional carriers are going to be a little bit more hungrier for volume, especially something that has a lot of volume like Temu. And so they're getting great deals, great rates. Although I was talking with a regional carrier earlier this week and said that a lot of these guys are saying, you're questioning if they want to work with Temu or Shein in the future, just because it's an enormous amount of volume coming into their system. It is not good volume. It's low cost, and the rumor is that maybe they don't pay on time as quickly as they could. And so I think that there's the last thing they do, kind of with their cost optimization strategy, is they are putting all of the onus for returns and the cost of returns onto their factories, and they're actually penalizing the factories if the consumers don't like their product and there's complaints that result in returns. And so from an optimization strategy, they've really looked at this and said, how can I outsource all of the responsibility effectively and make it as cheap as slow as possible in order to keep that cost as low as possible.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, to be able to ship a product from Guangzhou to America for under $1 is just insane to think about. And, their cross-border logistics strategy is pretty insane too. I mean, they're taking up like most of the air freight capacity, like in terms of the aggregate that comes into America. I mean, it looks like, shipping 2 million tons of air freight capacity or 40 Boeing 747s per day, which is insane. They are definitely at risk to fluctuations in air freight costs, that's for sure. But really, all of this is able to work because of Section 321. So, all their products that they're coming in to the States with are valued at under $800 per shipment. And so they're not paying any duties or tariffs on this. I think that's probably honestly one of the biggest risks for Temu and any business like this is, if those Section 321 laws change, they could really, really be in trouble very quickly. I don't foresee those changing, but just something to think about when it comes to risk in their cross-border strategy. And there was a report in June 2023 from the House of Representatives that stated that over 30% of all daily packages shipped to the US are from Shein or Temu, which is like just insane to think about. A third of the packages shipped in the US are from one of these two companies, which is just insane to think about. And they're kind of building like empires around this Section 321 loophole in our import rules, which, Representative Gallagher, a Wisconsin Republican, kind of brought to the community as well in terms of saying, hey, these two Chinese e-commerce platforms are taking advantage of this law. And so they need to take a hard look at this to see, can this, be changed, or can we, position this in a different way to benefit or level the playing field for American companies. But yeah, it's crazy to think about the amount of volume they're shipping and how they're utilizing Section